Developed by Vanillaware and published by Atlas, 13 Sentinels Aegis Rim is a visual novel given steroids, turned up to 11, and unleashed on the world in all its glorious post-apocalyptic tragedy. It's a beautiful mix of side-scrolling adventure and RTS that I thoroughly enjoyed. Well, mostly. It's still a masterclass in visual novel storytelling despite my complaints on the way it was told. After all, this game almost didn't exist. Originally supposed to be released in 2018, this game suffered 2 different delays getting out. One because of the Vita cancellation, and the other because of the 11th plague. We really have the localization team to thank for all of their hard work during whatever 2020 was. While this game had great storytelling, like I said before, I have some issues with how it was delivered, specifically exactly what happened in 2188. There's no way to view what happened there in order. Believe me, I've looked. Even the wiki isn't entirely clear, and the wiki page knows everything. So I took it upon myself to slice this game open and dissect exactly what happened in 2188, to the best of my ability at least. There's going to be a bit of editorializing, especially about the game's theme and overall story. So this is your huge spoiler warning, okay? This video is going to spoil the entire game for you. Maybe not every plot twist, every revelation, every character, or the ending, but finding out exactly what happened in 2188 spoils the game's entire mystique. So I'm genuinely asking that you play this game and enjoy it for yourself before watching this video. Trust me, you won't regret it. So without further ado, my name is Dr. Cannon, and I will be your surgeon for today. The entire plot of 13 Sentinels is really very intricate, with twists and turns, and eventually it'll start making your head spin. Now, inevitably there will be someone who will say, well, I understood what was happening right away. Like they'll get a cookie for it. I'm not one of those people, because I can tell you that this story, told in flashbacks, can get very convoluted. Now, it's hard to tell where everything begins, and that's with 2 very desperate people. Chihiro Morimura, desperate to save humanity, and Kengo Ogata, who is desperate to stay alive. In 2187, Chihiro Morimura brings her friend Kengo Ogata, CEO of Shikishima Industries, back to life as an AI, which I'm sure didn't give his son Nenji an inferiority complex at all. However, this was just a test run for Project Arc. She and her team designs mostly everything for Project Arc. However, there's a fly in the ointment. Renya Goto, the new CEO of Shikishima. He uses Project Arc to cover up some shady business deals, saying that it's where all the money's going, and that doesn't make it easier when Nenji Ogata denies funding for the project altogether. Just like that, Dr. Morimura doesn't have enough to fund Project Arc, so she starts doing some shady business deals of her own, selling nanomachines, also known as interlocutors, on the black market. Unfortunately, something happens with the nanomachines, rendering them defective, and an infection starts to spread to everyone. 2188 is not a fun time for humanity. In fact, everyone is either dead or dying from the nanotech plague. Only a handful of people, the people who worked on Project Arc, are still alive and uninfected, living in a single space colony. Those people are Dr. Tamao Kurabe, a leading authority in AI, Natsuno Minami, a spacecraft engineer, Dr. Yuki Takamiya, her mother and fellow spacecraft engineer, Keitaro Miura, a design engineer, Natsuno's significant other and history fuckboy, Tsukasa Okino, an engineer and programmer who really should have double-checked their work, Takatoshi Hijiyama, their significant other and a high-ranking military officer, Dr. Tomi Kisaragi, terraforming researcher, Dr. Tetsuya Ida, most likely the system administrator and definitely a fuckboy, Dr. Ryoko Shinonome, a genetic engineer, and Tetsuya Ida's significant other, and yikes. Jiro Izumi, another military officer and lover of Chihiro Morimura, and later Megumi Yakushiji, who is taken in by Jiro Izumi after her father pleads for his life. This moment is particularly heartbreaking because it shows Izumi and Hijiyama are actually both effective leaders. Hijiyama is willing to make the tough decisions even though it sucks. He clearly wants to take Megumi in, but he knows he can't. Otherwise, everyone in the colony could die. Izumi is more of the achieve the impossible type, who's willing to put his life on the line for one person, and he's willing to take responsibility for anything that might go wrong. I want to drive home that neither of these answers are incorrect, and both of them are bad decisions. That's probably why their dispute ended in a shootout. Renya Goto knows he can't hide forever, so he hires assassin A. Sekigahara to kill Chihiro Morimura as recompense for getting him away from the infection. All Sekigahara wants is revenge on Morimura for betraying humanity, and he blows up a portion of the space colony, killing her and likely several others. This is where the game really could have benefited from some dates, because I can't tell if this conversation between Hijiyama and Okino takes place before or after the explosion. The wiki says before, but I say after, mostly because of Hijiyama's damaged comm and their chat about life support for the colony. That would explain why Okino used the code from the game Mighty Kaiju Daimos. Despite Hijiyama's concerns about the game's infrastructure, Okino insists that the code, despite being a literal kaiju spawner, won't be spawning any kaiju because it's just the environment code. And to be fair, they're right. However, we all know without this code, this game would not have happened. They were already overcritical of Morimura in the first place, so it would make sense that they would prioritize living with their significant other over this plan that might not work. However, Jiro Izumi, and the person who meant most to Chihiro Morimura, thinks otherwise. He and Nenji Ogata, who at this point is probably just trying to make up for his refusal to fund Project Arc in the first place, wants to use the colony's remaining energy to complete Project Arc and Chihiro Morimura's dream. Now, if you'll allow me to editorialize for a little bit, let's be real here. Both Hijiyama and Izumi are on two sides of the same selfish spectrum, optimism and realism. On Izumi's side, you have optimism. Project Arc is humanity's last hope for survival, and Chihiro Morimura's last and greatest project. He loved Chihiro, so of course he wants to continue her vision, and maybe, just maybe, he and Chihiro can be reborn somehow, and be together, which at this stage is just wishful thinking, even if it did come true in the long run. On Hijiyama's side, you have realism. Project Arc is a long shot. It could take thousands, maybe even millions of years to even get to this planet somewhere in the galaxy. Even then, there's no guarantee that any of this could work. Also, you may or may not have some insider information that one of the programmers cut corners during its completion. That, and all his grief, is probably what pushed Izumi over the edge. Izumi shoots and kills Okino. Hijiyama shoots Izumi in revenge. He leaves a dying message, pleading with the powers that be, anyone, that if he's ever reborn, he will have the power to protect his friends and his Tsukasa. After all that work, to save the people they love and honor their wishes, Jiro Izumi and Takatoshi Hijiyama die alone. While the game never outright states when Miura, Minami, Takamiya, Ogata, and Kisaragi die, it's safe to assume that they were either killed in the explosion or the shootout. The only people that are left in the entire human race are Tetsuya Ida and Ryoko Shinonome. Out of everyone in that colony, it had to be the galaxy's most toxic couple. If their 1985 clones are anything to go off of, Ryoko was more obsessed with Ida than actually in love with him, and Ida saw her as little more than a useful tool. However you want to see it, all that really matters is Ida did something to destroy that last little bit of hope in her. According to the wiki, the game's creator said in a Frontline Japan interview that Ida likely refused a lover's suicide, which sent her into a downward spiral. But I have looked this article up, left, right, and center, and I don't see it anywhere. After all her friends have killed each other and her husband betrayed her, Ryoko Shinonome sabotages Project Arc, saying that the universe will be better off without humans. She takes the portion of Okino's copied code and puts the kaiju spawner back in, leaving the Ark in a perpetual cycle of destruction and reanimation. A brief side note here. I know it is easy to blame Okino for the Daimos code, but none of that would have happened if Ryoko hadn't have gone off the deep end. But I digress. One of the reasons I think that Ida was the system administrator is because somehow he was aware of what Shinonome did to the Ark. I suppose seeing whatever the hell Shinonome did to the Ark helped Ida see that Chihiro and several others tried to add their own AI to the system. Jiro Izumi is really the only one who succeeded, putting in Chihiro's AI and preparing a host overwrite for her. He records a log, sending it to Renya Goto, who's probably already dead, if not from gunshots, then definitely from old age because, damn. In his frustration, he calls everyone hypocrites. And I hate to say it, but he's right. What's the point of giving humanity a new start if you put all your old problems into it? You'll end up right back where you started. And they did, several times over millions of years. Thanks for that, Ryoko. Big help, by the way. Super. Throughout the game, the Sentinel pilots struggle with the memories of the past and have to deal with their terrible decisions. And yes, much of what happened in 2188 is just that. Bad decisions. According to the game, Tetsuya Ida's transmission to the presumably dead Renya Goto is the last of what we hear from anyone in 2018. We can assume that the last of the life support in the colony died and took them along with it. TDLR, in 2188, Chihiro Morimura's Project Arc was refused funding. Determined to pull it off, she ended up selling nanomachines on the black market. These nanomachines were defective and accidentally destroyed humanity via infection. Stranded on a space colony, Chihiro is assassinated by Ace Sekigahara, after which a debate breaks out whether to sustain the Arc or sustain the colony. Her lover, Jiro Izumi, decides the latter by force, but ends up dying in the resulting firefight, along with everyone else, except for Doctors Ida and Shinonome. However, as the last of humanity, Shinonome succumbs to despair and sabotages Project Arc one last time with hopes that it'll be stuck in a never-ending cycle and never reach the planet it was going to. They eventually die, thinking everything they worked for was for nothing, and that humanity will never come back. As much as I love this game, I feel like exactly what happened in 2188 is a major weak point. I wish they would have spelled it out, or at the very least put the transmissions in chronological order. That way we know what happened and why. I would have liked to know what happened with each of the primes from 2188 and how they died. So here's how I think it panned out. I think Tomi and Miura died with Chihiro, especially because she spoke so highly of them later into the game, and she didn't really have time to see them devolve into the crap fest that happened afterwards. In the life support versus Project Arc debate, Yuki would have been on Okino's side, and Natsuno would have been on Izumi's until he shot Okino. I believe that she would have died trying to help get Shinonome and Ida out of the battle. Also, I believe that Shinonome felt so deeply betrayed because Ida was on the opposite side of the debate from her. I reckon she would have wanted to spend the rest of her life with him, but he didn't want that. Pretty ironic considering that his clone was the one who became just as disgusted with humanity and as obsessed with someone as she was. When it comes down to it, they were doomed from the start. No one is entirely right or wrong here. It's just a conflict of ideologies. It would be safer just to make sure the rest of your life is comfortable as possible. It would have probably been the wisest option considering the lack of resources, but it reeks of complacency. Just waiting to die is honestly pretty horrifying. On the other side, there's Project Arc. It gives you some semblance of hope that maybe you'll get a second chance. However, if we're being honest, Jiro Izumi didn't choose Project Arc for humanity's sake. He did it for Chihiro. It's kind of ironic in the end, millions of years later, that they both get what they want. The most powerful thing in 13 Sentinels isn't the kaiju, it isn't the Sentinels, it's love. The best and most terrible thing you can do in this game. Love drives everyone's motivations, and not just romantic love either. For instance, we have Natsuno and Yuki, or Miura and Okino. It's the central driving force for the entire game, and when you think about it, it's all these characters really have to hang on to, and all hell breaks loose when they lose it. While there are a lot of narrative issues in this game, that in no way makes it unplayable or impossible to understand. It's probably my favorite visual novel right now, though I do have little gripes with it, like not getting a scene because I didn't walk close enough to a door, or looking for loose chain. All that stuff is just pittance compared to the borderline masterpiece 13 Sentinels is. For my next game series, I will likely be moving on to an old favorite, Tales of Vesperia, just going down the line, hitting every Tales game that came after it, and Tales of the Abyss. I stream every day except Friday nights or Saturday afternoons. I'm on Twitter, Tumblr, Instagram, and TikTok if you want to hear anime hot takes and general rants, and mostly anything about food. Don't forget to like if you like this video, subscribe if you really liked it. The lollipops are on the way out, and I will see you in the next video.